Hi, I'm Helen.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're the authors of Work on Your Accent.
And these are our top 4 pronunciation tips for speakers of Chinese languages to help improve clarity in English. Okay, so Helen, I think that I would probably say that the first thing that gives away a speaker of a Chinese language is probably rhythm. And rhythm is very closely associated to this specific vowel called the schwa.
Yes.
The schwa is the unstressed vowel sound in English, and it replaces any written vowel, and it just sounds literally, if we make our mouths and face just completely neutral and we just go like in my name, Sarah, or Helen.
Yes, the second syllable of both of our names.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it often comes as a suffix on the end of a word. So for example, in a word like delicate, it's spelt A-T-E, which on its own we know would be 8. In this context becomes delicate. Now if you say delicate, people might work out what you're saying, but it would probably cause confusion and would take a second for the listener to process what you'd actually tried to say.
And the thing that I think people find really confusing with this is because it's spelled with an A, there's that desire to still be clear, isn't there? And so you want to pronounce the A, but actually fully pronouncing that vowel is going to make you less clear.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those little funny isms of English.
So I think the second sound that's really important for Chinese speakers when speaking English is final consonants.
Ah, yes.
And so what I mean by that is consonants that are on the end of a word. And in particular, it's the plosive consonants that make a really big difference here to clarity. So Sarah, do you want to show us what the plosive consonants are?
P, T, K, B, D, G.
So they're all the ones that kind of sound a bit explosive, the short, sharp consonants. And so when we have those on the end of a word, for Chinese speakers, it can be very tempting not to fully release those plosives and instead just to use a glottal stop where the breath gets stopped and the word is never fully completed. So an example of where this can be really important is if we take a pair of words like cat and cap, the only difference between those two words in terms of pronunciation is the final consonant. The first two sounds in there, k, a, are exactly the same. Yeah. And so if that final consonant isn't fully released, cat, for a British speaker, it's very hard to understand whether that word was cap or cat. So just learning how to release those final consonants can make such a big difference to how you'll be understood and how clear your spoken English will be.
I mean, and you don't want to be always relying on context to give your listener the information, because it may seem obvious, I'm putting the cat on my head, but you never know. So Helen, I think number 3 on our list should be consonant clusters.
Yeah.
So one of the interesting features of English is that we can have more than one consonant together without a vowel dividing them. And sometimes it can be really tempting to sort of skirt over some of those consonants in the middle of what we call a consonant cluster, literally just a cluster of consonants. But in reality, the best thing you can do is fully pronounce each one of those consonants for clarity. For example, in the word children, in the middle there we have L, D, R together. If we miss any one of those, we lose clarity and we can start to go, what was that word? So yeah, we want to pay a lot of attention to consonant clusters, especially in the middle of words.
And a good way to work on this can be just to break that consonant cluster down, can't it?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're finding that you're really struggling with doing them all in one go, instead of thinking, okay, I have to go uldren, just think d, and then speed that up, and that's a great way to practice.
And my final top tip for Chinese speakers would be about nasal consonants.
Ah, good one.
So in British English, we've got 3 different nasal consonants, and all that it means when I'm saying they're nasal is that the air's being released through the nose when you make them. So those 3 consonants are as in me, as in no, and as in sing. And For speakers of Cantonese or Mandarin, it can be quite difficult to distinguish between the three, especially the second two. So the first one, that one's made by lifting the tip of the tongue just a touch behind your teeth onto what's called the alveolar ridge or the gum ridge. Whereas the other one, we make that one by leaving the tip of the tongue completely down and lifting the back of the tongue up towards the soft palate. Yeah, and again, this can be really important for meaning, because if you think of two words like sin and sing, the only difference between those two words in terms of pronunciation is whether it's an alveolar nasal, or a velar nasal. So an example of a word where this becomes really important is something like evening, because in there we've got the two different kinds of N right next to each other, separated just by one vowel sound. And so it can be really challenging for Chinese speakers to be able to pronounce a word like that. And I think the best way to achieve it is going to be just by slowing right down, being really specific about what's physically happening inside your mouth, what you can feel, even if you can't hear the difference. Can you feel that it's the tip of the tongue and then the back of the tongue?
And you can see it as well, can't you? If you use a mirror, it can be a really useful way to practice articulation by holding a mirror up in front of your mouth and just looking at what your tongue is doing. Because sometimes it's difficult, our brain doesn't give us the right information and the right feedback. So holding the mirror up and going, oh yeah, can be a really great way to practice.
Definitely, so useful. So those were our top pronunciation tips for speakers of Chinese languages, and should be a great place to start when you're working on your English accent.
We hope you found them useful. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.